Section 1, Design Controls and Criteria. The roadway design resources available to you for the class are the Roadway Geometric Design Notes for you to keep, the Engineering Policy Guide, a searchable electronic document that can be found at http://epg.modot.org, and the Design Standard Plans for Highway Construction, also known as standard drawings. These resources are available to you all the time at MoDOT. The MoDOT Standard Plans for Highway Construction show all the details on how to construct certain work items. The last hard copy of the standard plans was issued in July of 2004. However, all these plans are currently available electronically and located in ProjectWise. Plans are in a microstation format and they're placed in folders according to effective date. To access the standard plans for highway construction, you can go to ProjectWise under the CAD Standards folder. Some other non-MoDOT resources that you can use for the class, but also for your design in general, are the AASHTO Policy on Geometric Design of Highways and Streets, better known as the Green Book. For the class will be used in the 2001 version. However, there are newer versions of the Green Book in the district offices. Each district office is responsible for buying their own copy of the book. If you don't have a copy of the Green Book in your district office, talk to your DDE to see if there is a copy floating around or if you need to buy a newer version. Also, a good resource to have handy at the district is the AASHTO Roadside Guide Design Manual and the Highway Capacity Manual. Both of these guides are also available at the district office. If you don't have the most current version, you can talk to your DDE to see if you can purchase one for the district use. The Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices and other AASHTO and federal highway publications are also available on the web or through purchasing by the district. There are many publications that are specific to various topics. You'll have to find out if your topic is not covered in any of the above mentioned guidelines and books, and you may have to either borrow one or purchase one for the district use. Let's talk about the definitions used all the time during design. Every design is based on particular parameters. Let's discuss the traffic and design terms. Let's start with volume. Volume can be defined in a number of ways. Most commonly known, though, as the AADT, or annual average daily traffic, is the number of cars that travel in a road in a 24-hour consecutive period averaged over 365 days. The AADT is calculated by the traffic division at the district. We also refer to the AADT simply as ADT, but it is the same number. Another term that you need to become familiar, particularly if you are in an urban area, is the peak hour traffic. This is the traffic volume collected in a time shorter than one day. For example, rush hour volume, or a particular hour that you're interested in. Peak hour traffic is used to determine the design hourly volume, which is often expressed as a percentage of the AADT. You can find these numbers from your traffic staff in the district. New roadway projects should never be based on the current traffic volumes. Instead, a design volume of a distant future should be obtained. Future traffic volumes are hard to accurately be predicted, and so over the years in the academia world, highway engineers have found that a maximum design period is in the range of 15 to 24 years. At MoDOT, we use a design volume of 20 years for new construction. According to AASHTO, for reconstruction rehabilitation projects, a period of 5 to 10 years may be chosen. 3R projects are usually 10-year design volume, although we have done a smaller design volume, like 5 years, for example. 3R stands for resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation. These are basically projects that you would call they are in maintenance mode. It's not a new alignment, and it's not necessarily an intersection design, but simply a resurfacing, restoration, rehabilitation of either pavement or bridges. Consult your project manager or your DDE to see what design volume we're going to be using, whether it's 5-year or 10-year or something in between. Traffic composition is something that we often use to determine our design, particularly of the pavement. Truck traffic volume is collected and determined in percentages to be used in the design. Now, anything that we categorize as a truck is usually a vehicle that has a gross vehicle weight of 9,000 pounds and having dual tires on at least one rear axle. Another important term is the design speed. This is a parameter used in design. It is the maximum safe speed that can be maintained on a section of roadway for specific design features. The design vehicle is the vehicle that we used in our designs that determine the characteristics that we are going to assume most of the vehicles traveling the roadway that we're designing, establishing all the design controls for that roadway. So this vehicle is important as a design parameter because we use the weight and dimensions and the operation characteristics for the roadway to be designed. We can classify and design vehicles in various categories. Passenger cars are cars, SUVs, minivans, and vans and pickup trucks. Buses can be the intercity buses, city transit, or school buses. Trucks, again, those are single unit trucks or tractor semi-trailer combinations. And then there is a specific category for recreational vehicles as they have very specific characteristics. In the AASHTO Green Book, Exhibit 2-1 of the 2001 version, you can see the design vehicle dimensions, and in Exhibit 2-2, you can see the turning radii. You can browse the Green Book through the various exhibits in this chapter to show all the minimum turning path for the various different design vehicles. We pay attention to the vehicle performance and pollution in the urban areas particularly. Acceleration and deceleration rates are a measure of vehicle performance and are important factors for proper design of ramps, climbing, passing lanes, turnout bays, but also for vehicular pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, any car emissions that we need to take into account when designing an urban area, particularly if the urban area has some Let's talk about how the drivers interact with the highway and the information system presented to them. This is important because this is how we design all the signage on our roadways. And this is how we lay out our roads as well, geometrically speaking. Let's talk about the driving task. This is a series of actions that the driver does to complete the journey. The task is based on many interrelated activities, which are classified as follow. Control. This is the steering, the speed control, shifting, and so on. The guidance. That is following road signs. And navigation, which is what we do prior to getting in the car, such as trip planning in general, looking at a map or GPS routes and things like that. Designers should keep design simple and provide continuity in the roadway design to make it easier on the driver to complete the driving task. We need to understand how the driver relates to the information system. You need to remember that drivers handle information through a short and complex process. This process happens in a short amount of time called reaction time, and it basically includes 3 different steps. One is acknowledgement. This is when we recognize that something has happened, a situation exists. The second step is the decision making. This is where the driver for a second thinks, what should I do? Should I slam on the brakes? Should I continue at the rate that I'm going? Should I move to the next lane? Things like that. And then the reaction is the last step, and that is actually doing something based on the decision that you made. So taking action. The reaction time, then, it is the time that it takes the driver to react to a situation. And it increases depending on the complexity of the situation and the amount of information processed. The longer the reaction time, the greater the chance for error. Why is that? Well, that's simply you have more time to analyze the situation. You have more time to think about if scenarios, what if this or what if that. And so you don't necessarily commit to a decision to react in time. For every expected situation, the average reaction time ranges from 0.6 seconds up to 2 seconds. That is a very short amount of time that our brain is going through all the process of acknowledging and decision making and actually deciding on acting on a particular situation. However, for unexpected events, this is, it just happens. You weren't warned. You just suddenly had to stop. The reaction time increases up to 35%. So taking from 2.6 seconds or more time for simple decision making and action. Drivers do react different to different situations, and that it is hard to control as a designer. However, if you understand how people react to those different situations, you can incorporate some of that into your design. Drivers react to situations based on the concepts of primacy and expectancy. Primacy is really how important is this to my safety to respond? And expectancy refers to the continuity or the familiarity of the roadway. So, for example, most people will react to situations differently if their children are in the vehicle. More than likely, people are going to be more cautious when they have somebody else in the vehicle for them, because how they have to think, how important is this to my safety and the safety of the people in my car? Also, when you are expecting a situation, you are going to react better than if you weren't. For example, if you're going through a downtown area and you've had 4 intersections that had four-way stops, then suddenly you come to a two-way stop or a traffic light. You may not recognize that. You may be expecting another four-way stop, and it takes a little bit for your brain to think that, oh, wait, this is different. Let's do something different to react to this situation. Now, there are two types of driver errors. One is due to situation demands. This is within your control as a designer. With careful planning and design, you can prevent these types of errors. The second type of error is due to driver deficiency, and there's very little that you can do about this particular error. The error of driver deficiency is due to lack of driver experience, influence of alcohol and drugs, texting, unattending, talking, messing with the radio, things like that, and advancing age. The highway capacity manual is a great tool to determine or assess the roadway capacities. I would say that most of the time, the capacity evaluation is going to be done prior to the project coming to your design desk. Highway capacity is basically the maximum hourly rate at which vehicles can reasonably travel a particular section of roadway during a given time under normal roadway and traffic conditions. The interesting thing about highway capacity is that there is no quantitative way to study highway capacity. We define highway capacity on something we call levels of service. And levels of service then are so subjective that have been an issue in designing roadways before, but you need to understand levels of service. A is free flow. Basically, you can go at any speed that you want to with any care in the world. There is nobody on the road that is going to make you stop or slow down. Levels of service B is reasonable free flow. Again, this is pretty good. You are, for the most part, maintaining the speed at your cruise control if you're using a cruise control, and it is free flow. Again, it's a very high level service. Level of service C is stable flow. This is where you may disengage your cruise control because it is stable, but maybe you cannot keep the speed that you're traveling constantly, and you may have to hit the brakes and then continue on. That is more of a normal level service. Then we have level service D, which is approaching unstable flow. That is when you are starting to notice a pattern that we may be here for a little bit. You're starting to see people slow down and just kind of randomly. Then level service E is unstable flow. That is the stop and go, stop and go, stop and go that you find during rush hour in an urban area. Is unstable. We don't have a steady flow. And finally, you have forced or breakdown flow. That is simply the traffic has come to stop and there's nothing you can do about it, and you may be there for a while. That is level service F. Facility selection. Let's talk about mobility and access. Roadways are classified based on both of these terms, mobility versus access to property. The faster traffic moves, the less access you'll have to adjacent property. And so roadways are classified based on that criteria for designing the roadways. If you look at the diagram, you can understand a little clearer that mobility is indirectly proportional to access. So, for example, a local street is going to be the one classification of road that has the most access to adjacent property but it's going to have the lowest design speed or posted speed, usually 25, 30 miles per hour, or in some cases even 20 miles per hour. But as you get into bigger streets, you will see that there will be less access to property and there's going to be higher posted speed on those roads. So now the rural roadway system consists of rural principal arterials, rural minor arterials, rural collectors, and rural local roads. And you need to think about these the way that you enter the rural area and you exit the rural area. So the rural principal arterials are going to be all those roads that are freeways and principal arterials which provide a pretty relatively high travel speed. So these are going to be those state and interstate traffic type movements in between urban areas and the rural areas. So interstate highways and US routes. Then you have the rural minor arterials, which link to the principal arterials and provide linkage between cities or larger towns. These type of roads integrate interstate and inter-county level travel. Then the rural collectors attach to the minor arterials and primarily carry all the inter-county traffic rather than the statewide. So while the minor arterials might have been like a Missouri road, the rural collector is going to be basically a county road. Then you have your local roads, which include all the roads not classified as any of the things we've talked about and provide direct access to adjacent property.
In this slide, we included a diagram from the Federal Highway and their functional classification guidelines. The AASHTO 2018 did not have a diagram that had roadway classifications, but the Federal Highway did, and that's why we utilize this little diagram. They're slightly different than MoDOT's. With the federal classifications, they just have arterials and not a major or minor. They do have collectors and locals as well. They state that since the cities and the larger towns generate and attract a large proportion of the relatively longer trips, the arterial highways generally provide direct service for such travel. They go on to say that the intermediate functional category, the collectors, serves small towns directly, connects them to the arterial network, and collects traffic from the bottom level system of local roads, which serves the individual farms and other rural land uses.
The urban roadway system has a similar setup. You have the urban principal arterials. These are freeways and other principal arterials which provide relatively high travel speed. These roads carry movements entering and exiting the urban areas, or movements bypassing a central city, things like interstates or even US routes. Urban minor arterials are arterials not classified as principal. This system provides intra-community travel and may include bus routes. However, this particular system does not enter neighborhoods. So these are going to be your main roads within an urban area that are adjacent to the highway, the interstate, or the US routes. Then you have your urban collectors, which are both providing land access and traffic circulation within neighborhoods within the city, commercial and industrial areas. And they also carry local bus routes. So these are slightly smaller routes that connect to the minor arterials. So you think about coming into the city from a principal arterial and you enter a minor arterial that then connects you to those urban collectors. The urban collectors then connect you to the local roads, which provide the direct access to adjacent property and have the lowest level of mobility. So these are the roads that may not necessarily carry bus routes. According to MoDOT, however, we classified our roadways in two major categories: major highways and non-major highways. Major highways are all the principal arterials and above in the state, which include all the national highway system routes and interstates, as well as some other routes which are not part of the national highway system, but are considered major for the area. Then you have your non-major highways. These are going to be all your minor arterials and below, your county roads and so on.
In this slide, we included the diagram in the EPG category 232 facility selection. And in this diagram, MoDOT shows the major highways in the state of Missouri.
Let's talk about the primary design guidance according to the Engineering Policy Guide for MoDOT design work. Roadway design will be based on the following criteria. Your design speed will always be your posted speed. The level of service that we're going to design our highways are rule 20-year peak hourly traffic at levels of service D and off-peak at levels of service C. So here you can say that we are saying that you can have a new road that has a level of service D during that busy hour. Now, in an urban area, we are willing to go a little lower level of service, and that is the level of service E during 20-year peak hourly traffic and off-peak level of service D. We are going to design based on system continuity. What does that mean? Well, basically, if we have a road that, for example, US 36, which is 4-lane for a lot of the roadway, when we design a section of that roadway, we're going to try to provide a continuous experience to the driver. So system continuity. We're going to design a 4-lane highway because that's what the rest of Route 36 really is. We like to also design things based on access versus mobility, expressway versus freeways, two-way left turn lanes and passing lanes. So these are some of the guidance that you need to keep in mind when making your design. For selecting lane widths, basically your major roadways are going to always be 12-foot lanes. Your minor roadways can be anything between 10 and 12 feet wide. Your auxiliary lanes are to be as wide as the thorough traffic lane. So if you are designing an auxiliary lane on a roadway that is 12 foot wide, every lane is 12 foot wide, then your auxiliary lane needs to be 12 foot wide. For very low volume local collector roads and streets carrying less than 400 vehicles per day, you need to use the guidance provided in the AASHTO Green Book under the section for geometric design of very low volume local roads. Shoulder widths. It is important to understand that we don't want to eliminate shoulders altogether. This is something that motorists are expecting. Shoulders of major roadways can be anything between 4 and 10 foot wide, so you have a pretty open design here. Your shoulders on the rural minor roads, however, can be smaller, can be as small as 2 feet and as wide as 4 feet. Shoulders will not be provided on urban roads with no access control if ample turning opportunity exists for a vehicle to leave the roadway. So in other words, no U2 paved shoulders, and you probably have never seen a U2 paved shoulder, but somebody at the district may refer to something as a U2 paved shoulder, which kind of looked like a long sidewalk is what it was, and so it created more confusion than it provided help. So we eliminated that kind of a design. during the practical design years. Also, an earthen shoulder will be provided behind a mountable curb. So just keep those things in mind as you are designing your roadway. Your median widths, we design for a 60-foot depressed median whenever possible for expressways and freeways. That is our preferred way. However, it doesn't have to be. We can have narrower than 60-foot medians as long as we use an acceptable barrier on expressways and freeways. Your side slopes need to be designed based on the report recommendations from your geotechnical staff at the district, as well as the ASHTO Roadside Design Guide to meet a safe clear zone. Your back slope grade should be designed based on the geotechnical report recommendations, including your bench-in design if necessary. When good quality rock is present, you can use a 1-to-1 back slope from the back of the ditch to establish theoretical slope limits for determining right-of-way limits. Your roadside ditches need to be very carefully designed. The purpose of a ditch is to provide, one, adequate drainage for the design storm event, and also to prevent seepage under the pavement through a permeable base. The geometry selected for your ditches are going to be based on your hydraulic capacity. Keep the side slope requirements based on the clear zone principles and the soil conditions. When you are using pavement edge drains, make sure that the ditch is of sufficient depth. Your minimum ditch grades are based on the drainage velocities needed to avoid sedimentation, as maximum ditch grades are based on a tolerable velocity for vegetation and shear on soil types. Carefully design your erosion control methods. The appropriate erosion control methods are there to reduce or withstand the flow velocity. And this is particularly important in construction. So erosion control design is very important. So take the time to understand how the erosion control needs to be contained. Let's talk about control access versus access management. So the two terms are oftentimes used interchangeably, but they really are completely different things. Control access refers to the regulation of the access, while access management is the process of properly planning and designing the access to the public roadway system to ensure the traffic flow more smoothly and with fewer crashes. So access management is the process that as a designer you need to take into account when talking to property owners. Discussing the access to property needs to happen early on in the process so that you can come to a consensus and you can negotiate with the property owner, or the project manager can have sufficient time to understand the needs of the property owner and negotiate a solution that provides the best, the safest approach for accessing the property. Again, why should we control the access, or why should we think about access management? We have a lot of permits that we issue through the traffic division and the districts that determine the control to the access. So these are things like the actual size of the driveways and the slopes and things like that. But roadways with full access control consistently experience much lower crash rates than those without any access control whatsoever. To achieve an acceptable access management design, you should limit direct access to roads with higher functional classification. Locate traffic signals to emphasize through traffic movement. Locate driveways and major entrances to minimize interference with traffic operations. And use curved medians and locate median openings to manage access movements and minimize conflict. Pedestrian facilities may be part of your design. The Engineering Policy Guide Category 642 is where you will find all the guidelines regarding pedestrian facilities. You have multiple resources available for designing pedestrian traffic. The Engineering Policy Guide, the American with Disabilities Act Accessibility Guidelines. There is a link on the Engineering Policy Guide to this particular publication. There is also the AASHTO Guide for the Planning, Design, and Operation of Pedestrian Facilities. This publication is an AASHTO publication that the district can purchase. There are many federal highway publications that you can find online, or for technical assistance, you can contact your MoDOT non-motorized transportation engineer. When do we provide sidewalks? Basically, the Engineering Policy Guide will tell you that the local jurisdiction has a comprehensive pedestrian policy in the area of the proposed improvement. Is one of the reasons why we would place sidewalks as part of the project. Where there is a public support through local planning organizations. Where there is evidence of pedestrian traffic along proposed improvement. Where there is pedestrian traffic generators, for example, a school or a commercial area. The route provides access across a natural or man-made barrier. Or any time when we disturb existing sidewalks during the construction of a project. The following are MoDOT sidewalk design criteria. In developed areas, separate the sidewalks from the traveled way. Sometimes you can use a barrier curb, or you can use some other means. No sidewalks on paved shoulder behind mountable curbs. You may provide paved shoulders in rural areas to accommodate pedestrian movements. Designated sidewalks or pedestrian paths must be accessible according to all ADA guidelines. Minimum width is 5 feet and minimum depth is 4-inch thick sidewalk. It is okay to reduce to the minimum width of 4 feet, which is the minimum allowed by ADA guidelines. These guidelines change quite often, so it is important that you refer to the Engineering Policy Guide and the ADA guidelines every time that you design a pedestrian facility in your project. Pedestrian facilities are designed in a similar way you design any other type of transportation facility. So we gotta take into account the walking speeds of the pedestrians. Average speeds for pedestrians range from 2.6 to 6 feet per second. The MUTCD uses an average of 4 feet per second as a design control. Some intersection guidelines include: design should provide adequate storage area for those waiting to cross intersection. Crosswalks should be wide enough to accommodate pedestrian flow in both directions during the duration of the pedestrian signal phase. Avoid designing extremely wide streets, as this provides too long of a pedestrian crosswalk. But when it is unavoidable to design a wide street, make sure you're providing that adequate storage area, such as islands, medians, at which the pedestrians can safely wait until the next available phase for them to cross the intersection. Some other intersection guidelines include eliminate left or right turns, prohibit right turn on red, convert from two-way to one-way streets. You will see that in very urban areas like downtowns, there are many one-way streets, and this is to accommodate pedestrian traffic. Provide separate signal faces for pedestrians. Provide for pedestrian separations. So when you're designing an intersection, you want to make sure that you take into account pedestrian flow. Let's move on to bicycle facilities. When do we provide bicycle facilities? Basically, the design and installation of bicycle facility is at the sole discretion of the director or the district engineer. All decisions regarding bicycle facilities must be properly documented. Dedicated bicycle facilities will not be provided on interstate roadways. If the local jurisdiction is willing to assume the cost and the maintenance of the bicycle facility and right-of-way associated with it, the design should consider inclusion of those bicycle lanes. Existing bicycle facilities will be put back in place anytime that we disturb the existing facility during the improvement of a project, and those will be replaced at MoDOT's expense. Let's talk about right-of-way. Anytime that you have a project, you need to consider the right-of-way. Sometimes there is no right-of-way to be taken, but when there is, you need to understand how we classify the right-of-way. Right-of-way is classified according to the type of access given to the roadway. The right-of-way type related to access control and the limits of such control is indicated on the plans and on the title sheet by proper legend. When designing a new project, not necessarily a rehabilitation project, but a new alignment or expansion of a roadway, you need to consider the minimum right-of-way width. We acquire only the minimum right-of-way width needed to build or maintain the facility. Attempt to minimize breaks in the right-of-way line. For example, if you are in a curve and the curve has spirals, do not put spirals as part of your right-of-way line. You can place a straight tangent line between the points. It's much easier to stake if you have consistent lines as part of the right-of-way line. Take into account utilities, corridors, easements, and future improvements, and the maintenance of the facility when considering right-of-way. As always, make sure that you're coordinating with the right-of-way group in your district. The types of right-of-way that we have at MoDOT include the normal right-of-way. This is a type of right-of-way where we allow entrances to the road wherever necessary to access a property. All access still requires a permit that goes through the traffic division. Controlled access. This is a limited access, limits the points of access to specific location types and dimensions. Fully controlled access. This allows access only at interchanges through extensive outer or service roadways. You will find fully controlled access on major highways. Partial controlled access controls access at intersections at all state roads and side roads which intersect a state route carrying an ADT over 1700. You will find this type of access on the major highways. No right-of-way access basically prohibits access to side roads near the interchanges. This type of access you will find on major highways, but specifically on interstate highways. So fully controlled access It is the type of access that you will see on an interstate with no right-of-way access at the interchanges. Partial control access will be found at major highways such as US 63, US 67, US 50, and such. A particular project may have all types of right-of-way involved in different sections of the project, so make sure you're documented properly on the legend what type of access you are acquiring. If no access, if not right-of-way access being acquired, that needs to be also indicated on the title sheet as no right-of-way takings. The right-of-way takings are based on the survey baseline. The survey center line is not necessarily in the center of the road, so it's very important that you understand early on that a designer should never move a survey baseline that a surveyor has picked up for them. Engineering Policy Guide, Section 235 covers preliminary plans, where you can read that the district prepares their preliminary plans. So the designer prepares the preliminary plans once they've tied the horizontal and vertical alignment and they have established tentative right-of-way limits. The horizontal alignment is to be tied to the existing roadways and alignments. This tie location is to be based on the field survey measurements and verifications that the surveyor picked up. Under Section 238 in the EPG, we cover surveying activities. Paragraph 238.3.1 tells us that the survey is made to physically establish that location in the field. It includes the location of all the man-made features in relation to the established roadway center line or that survey baseline in such a manner that these features can be accurately indicated on the plans. The survey is going to tie to the elevations based on the National Geodetic Survey NGS or the United States Geodetic Survey USGA datums necessary to locate grades, culverts, bridges, and to compute excavation quantities. Section 238.3.6 tells us that before beginning a survey, the district survey party should be furnished a copy of the location study. They are to become familiar with the type of proposed improvement, the plan for improvement, or the location of the intersections, the location and type of interchanges, and all other information necessary to complete the survey. As you can see, the right-of-way taking is directly tied to the actual survey, so it's very important that you keep the surveyor in the loop, that you include him in your core team, and that they are part of your team from the very beginning. That way we don't have any issues later on when we're trying to negotiate right-of-way and the right-of-way is not like it reads on the deed or some other legal document that was prepared by a surveyor originally. So it's important that you understand how that works.